Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about vocations in the priesthood, and maybe vocations in other areas, and the closure of churches in Ireland. So if you want to go ahead there.
That's right. Yeah, vocations have a wide application. Oftentimes, when people talk about vocation, they often think just about the priesthood or religious life. But there's vocations in other areas. Um, there's vocations. People have ladies, particularly have an interest often in nursing, and it's to be admired and supported. Now, they need to go back to the drawing board about nurses. There was a time a nurse could be a nurse and be a very good nurse with just a primary certificate from the national school. And oftentimes they do their training in the hospitals in England, who were always looking for Irish nurses, and they were well looked after and treated and were very good and went on to be in demand like here in this country, which they often come back to, and worked in hospitals and were very good. They got great training, and because that was the way it was. And but one of the Fianna Fáil ministers, Martin, that Micheál Martin, when he was the minister for health, changed all this from the primary cert to university education. Went from one extreme to another. And so that nurses now that want to be nurses have to have high marks in the Leaving Cert to go on to university. And really, it was a very peculiar decision for anybody to make. And this is the danger with people that like Micheál Martin, who doesn't necessarily have that between their ears, because it was obvious if the nurses were good with the primary cert, perhaps there was no harm to move to the intermediate cert. And people have the bit more education, which they begin to receive, and so therefore that should have been the standard for nurses, because there's a lot of girls want to be nurses, but they can't reach the standard, and then they
Hmm.
become nursing assistants. So these are the vocations where there's hurdles and no need for them.
Hmm.
So that's the secular end of things. And then there's vocations to be an apprentice in some trade or another. I think we spoke about that. And because of the lack of what they did, there's not enough tradesmen to deal with the various issues. There's a shortage of tradesmen, and so the tradesmen from other jurisdictions to try and fill the gap.
Hmm.
And that's a very not a good way to go. And the same as there's nurses now from many countries that don't have the English language as their first language and the culture. And it can be difficult and it can be dangerous. I know one sister, Irish, and that's what they're called in a ward. It's not a nun or that, but she said that only two people from other jurisdictions, and they had to watch them because more than they should have, because of the fact of their lack of experience. So there you are, and their different culture, and they'd have to check what they were doing, because you could do the wrong thing. So that's another area to develop now. And the lack of apprentices in many areas means that there's a shortage of tradesmen. Now, we come on to the church. There's a shortage of vocations. When I was young, there was more vocations than there was vacancies in various parishes, because there was often a full complement of parish priest and curates, depending on the size of the town. I think in Boyle we had a parish priest and three curates, including one of them was a doctor of divinity, one of the curates. So, like normally, a doctor of divinity would be pretty high up. He would be maybe in charge somewhere else, but he never did. He stayed in Boyle, and he's buried there in the graveyard. McLaughlin was his name. Now, plenty of occasions, but the mass was celebrating the Latin Rite and all the rest of it. That was done away with, unfortunately, and and it resulted then in a gradual lack of vocations, where we had vocations and the missions. it deteriorated. And so now there's not enough vocations to the priesthood even to fill the smallest diocese. So they have to bring in priests from other countries, Africa, India, and wherever they can get them. But they can't get enough. And quite frankly, it's a pathetic situation. It has come about because of the decisions that the shepherds, the bishops took. They didn't have to take it. It wasn't in Vatican II whatsoever. So they took the decision to sort of put away the altar rails in the churches, um, do away with the rosary and benediction, do away with the men's and women's sodalities, which strengthen the families. And you do all these things. People got used to things, and suddenly it's all this way. And the priest used to face the tabernacle. Now suddenly he was back to the tabernacle and facing the congregation, so he seemed to be the centre. And instead of going up to the pulpit to give a sermon, which it was called, then they changed it to what thing called a homily. Now a homily is like something that you might have at home. You'd be talking in a you know in a nice fashion with your friends or wherever it was or your family. And so you'd be in a homily, you'd be at home. And I think that's the way I look at it. No, and so it was the whole thing was weakened. The sacrifice of the mass, the Eucharist, not rest. So there's something, but the quality of everything deteriorated. And then people are not attracted to become priests because, as priests, and when I was young, they were always in the clerical garb with the collar. Now you don't see them in that kind of dress at all, except an art priest that has a traditional way of approach, especially the older priests. The younger ones are going around, same as you or me. You would know them. And then the same thing happened with nuns. There was great vocations to all the Sisters of Mercy and Ursuline sisters and the Ursuline sisters and Loretta sisters and all this. These are the ones who give the education, presentation sisters, Mary sisters and Christian brothers and all this. But now there's no vocation to those because what do they do? Except for the orders that are in closed orders, they dress in the habit. They're dressed in ordinary clothes. And you don't know them. It was said in my time that you always knew priests and nuns by their garb. You would know if you were a Protestant, you wouldn't know. They had sisters as well, but they were dressed in ordinary clothes, so you wouldn't know them unless you were dealing with them. But here, it's the same thing happened in the Catholic Church. It went down, and people then are not attracted to be priests. The ones that are attracting priests is the ones that's celebrating Mass in the Latin rite still. Their churches are packed and plenty of vocations, more that they can handle. And likewise in the nuns, the ones that get their vocations are the ones that have the habit and these enclosed orders and so on and so forth. And they have plenty of vocations. So, but the shepherds and the ones in charge don't seem to be capable of rethinking their situation and sort of saying, well, that's the way it was years ago. There's ones now that wouldn't remember any of that. And then they're being taught, I think, in seminaries, they're not being taught the traditional strong way of giving a sermon. It's sort of like a kind of a be nice and be, but that's not the way. It's not a political thing of a jigs. You've got to speak the truth and speak it clearly. And those that do are often censored by the shepherds. So the first thing to do is go back to the drawing board, go back to see what was successful and start doing that. But the powers that be are not doing that. The Vatican is it seems to be gone astray. They're more interested in the climate and all this type of stuff and accompanied and sort of stuff that doesn't actually make sense, if you know what I mean. And there's a synod of synodality, kind of like a contradiction, and it's getting a lot of criticism because it's only the ones that actually are not Protestant Catholics that seem to be wanting things in a certain direction. You can't do things like that. So you go back to the drawing board. If what you've implemented is not working, put back the altar rates and all things like that, and start things the way they were. and do that. And then you might find people coming back. You might find the vocations, not this business of closing churches so the people have to go a longer distance to get mass. That's no way to. That's a recipe for disaster. And I think was foretold by Saint Malachy, which was another saint, and was a Saint Malachy, a saint, one of the apostles, I think, but Saint Malachy foretold the crows would be flying two churches, and the way it's going. And the way it's going, we did a program there about the bishop supporting this business of the drugs being deregulated. You've got to sort of have a what's right and go and do that. When we were growing up, there was none of this confusion that young people have. I wonder is it leading to the people going astray the way with the drug abuse and that you don't know, you see.
Hmm.
Uh, People have to be nourished and that way, and otherwise they're going to be going somewhere else to get whatever it is that they need. You see? So vocations to the priesthood is the most important business and to religious life, but they want to wear the clerical garb and go about and not be afraid. I think they're afraid in case they get abuse
They are absolutely.
from
I would agree there, you know. But I remember just to talk about vacations in a different way. I remember 30 years ago, I was a young man, much younger than I am now, and there was a man on the radio. He was a priest, a Catholic priest. And I was thinking of going to college. I was thinking of making a second stab at it. I was thinking I'll go to college. So I'll try a second time. And I was successful anyway.
good.
But the thing about it was anyway, so it was around August. So he was brought on to, I think it was RTE radio or something. And he was brought
Yeah,
on
they were
and
good one time. Yeah,
yeah, he was brought on anyway to give inspiration to the young people that were starting out in first year in college in Ireland. But what
yeah,
he said was it struck with me. He says, I hope they have the courage of their convictions to follow through on the vocations that they have chosen, you know? And
good.
conviction to follow your vocation is another area, you know, that people don't have the conviction, that belief, because they're so young, and that's at that moment, that's when they need support. And sometimes
Correct.
when they come from, say, the rural areas in Ireland, and then they go to Dublin, they get a bit lost, you know, and they can
They
suffer
do.
severe anxiety, and they don't, and then they drop out, and a whole lot of things happen. So some people are lucky enough that they do at a very young age find the courage of their convictions, and they follow through on the vocations and what they're supposed to do in life. And there's just a small few, gladly, that there's only a small number that don't, but maybe if there was more supports for them, they'd be able to follow through on their convictions, their
Correct.
vocations.
And now you're talking, that is correct. And it's this encouragement and this what you by experience because young people, as far as I'm concerned, and I was young, you need that sort of encouragement, and that from the adults to actually point the way forward in a way that you accept, because when we're young, we're learning, we're growing up, and we're forming views dependent on what we hear and what we kind of instinctively know to be right.
Hmm.
You don't need rocket science for that, but you have to be told. The same way, if you don't hear the word, how are you going to save your immortal soul? You
Well,
see where I'm
this
coming from?
this is
And this is
absolutely.
the problem with the lack of vocations and the lack of good spiritual guidance. And those that are good, there's one man from Listowel that's very good, Father Sean Sheehy. He was at the conference.
I
Did he
know.
get a cheer in Limerick when I was at that, coming up before he was even up more so than anybody else?
Yeah, Father
That tells
Sheehy.
me that he, yeah,
I know Father Sheehy. He's very passionate about what he does, and that's what I like. And when he's given a sermon,
well, he was great. He gave a great talk at that conference, and by goodness, did he get clapped? There was very good speakers, but by goodness, he certainly got clapped. So by the experience that he had to endure from the Bishop Brown of Kerry, it didn't do him blind bit of good. As a matter of fact, it brought him to the attention of people that support what he preached. Those
Yeah,
that don't are leaving themselves wide open for
we're-
God knows what.
absolutely.
He spoke the truth, and the truth will set you free.
It
Now,
will.
this is why the vocations to the priesthood is so important. Your soul has to be nourished. Is this why what they've inflicted on schools by way of their education for there's questions about it. I think they call it the Alive program or something, but it has dubious aspects. You've got to preach the truth. You heard it, I've heard it, and so I was very focused on what I was at. But you'd be getting pressure from this side and that side and the other, but you did have some fair idea of what was good.
This is the thing.
And
And I suppose like
yeah,
when I go back to the that priest on the radio 30 years ago, it shows how
yeah,
something, a powerful message can stay in your mind, right? And
correct.
just to remind our viewers that you now have over 800 videos. You've a phenomenal amount of videos. But for people who don't know, you actually do the live videos as well, and you're giving powerful messages in every video, and it's all common sense based on life experience.
Correct. That's it. And by the way, you don't need degrees, this, that, and the other for that. You need experience of the university of life, the pluses and minuses, and you experience it as you go through life. And you're fortunate when you reach a certain age. Sometimes we call it our second childhood. You all mentioned your childhood. I think I'm in my second childhood, but be that as it may, I have the experience and great experience, and really I like to share it. And thanks be to God with the internet now and the way that I think you facilitated this business of the live ones that I do for the prayer videos and all the rest of it with the laptop, which is great. And I'm able to do it then and help people, and without sort of being preaching that type of thing, just to sort of share and do what does for me. And I think people are interested in that.
They are,
They
you know,
need that sort of stuff.
they want people, I suppose people need hope, but they also need is a kind of a more of a conversational, unhurried type of hope. You know what I mean? So I think that's what you do basically. You give them hope, and we can see that as well. You get a lot of comments on your videos these days, and that's very, very encouraging, John Malone.
It is, and thanks be to God. And this is one of the gifts that thanks be to God, but because of the experience that I have and all the rest of it and what I noticed around. And
Hmm.
it's marvelous. I'll mention one thing. The shop in that I spoke about, an individual that's well known. It just had the shop there and was very successful. I think it was called Thornton's. Now,
Thornton's, okay.
it wasn't his name, it wasn't the person's name, but I'm just mentioning that Thornton's. I think that was the name of the shop because I would be fairly familiar with all that type of thing. Being that sort of, and I was in every nook and cranny that I could do business in, years back.
Hmm.
And I think I did business there in that particular premises.
Very
Yeah, I
good.
just mentioned that as an aside. You know what I'm
Uh,
talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
So thank you
yeah.
very much, John, and we shall have to do
Well, thank
more
you very much.
videos maybe tomorrow or the next day, and sure we'll talk soon.
Exactly. Yeah,
Thank
one or
you.
two more. Yeah, thanks very much, Oliver.
Thank you. Bye
Have a good
bye.
day.
Bye
Bye.
bye. You too.